Hello and welcome to Independent Podcast Service. I'm Paul.
And I'm Dave.
And this week we are discussing the episode of Kolchak, the Vampire. This episode originally aired October 4th, 1974, and would be the only episode to air in October. Dun dun dun.
Most likely because of reasons, but still sadness.
Yes. So let us start off with the number one film in America this weekend, Dave. Any guesses?
Yet around that time, at least sort of trying to keep within the frame of reference.
I would be a bit surprised if you're familiar with this.
Yeah, nothing is immediately coming to mind.
Yeah, it's something that would never happen in theaters today.
God, is it another one of those cases like it was a couple weeks back?
No, it's not just basically a clip show. It's they just re-released an old movie into theaters again.
Possibly understandable, but also the context of, was it kind of one of those ones where it only had a limited release, but now it's kind of a case of, oh, hey, we have this thing that not a lot of people know about. Do we want to release it again? It's like, we have nothing else interesting this week, so sure.
No, it was apparently a big hit at the time. It's a movie from 1972 called Cabaret with Liza Minnelli.
Okay, the name rings a bell, but it most likely is one of those cases of most likely have not seen it, and if I have, I do not remember it.
Yeah, it's a musical period drama.
Because it is a thing, surprisingly enough.
Yeah, it's to do with like the rise of fascism in Germany and stuff. So a very cheery film.
Yes, going through all those particular sorts of things.
Yes. Let us move on to the number one song in America this week, Dave. Any guesses?
Song-wise.
Yes.
Nothing that I'm specifically familiar with, though. You give me the title, and it's like, I know that song.
It is I Honestly Love You by Olivia Newton-John.
Again, most likely know it, but it's not immediately coming to mind.
Yeah, I don't know this one either. Alrighty, so let us move on to the episode, The Vampire.
As you know, they made a movie about it, so why not make an episode about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically a sequel to the first television film. And, yeah. Ah, damn it, I opened the wrong thing. Okay, so let us go down to there. And there we go. Okay, so again, I'm going to go with... I'll do this one. In Las Vegas, a woman is traveling along a lonely road, has a terrifying experience when she gets a flat tire. Emerging from the car to survey the damage, she cuts her finger on a tire iron and dribbles blood in the area. Suddenly, she is startled by a pair of human hands that begin to emerge from the earth, as if it were a body rising from the grave. She runs off into the night and reports her experience to the local police, who return to find only an area of freshly disturbed ground. When Kolchak is visited by Las Vegas Contact, he gets a tip about a series of deaths where the bodies are completely drained of blood. Immediately, he understands the implications, having once faced a vampire in the Las Vegas area. The strange deaths form a pattern moving away from Las Vegas towards Los Angeles. Coincidentally, Vincenzo starts to shop around the story of about transcendental meditation and wants to send someone from INS to interview a famous Indian guru in the LA area. Although Uptake is eager for the story, Carl manipulates Tony into assigning it to him, with the real intention of following up on the suspicious deaths. In a flashback, we see a double homicide committed by the vampire. A darkly beautiful young woman named Catherine Rollins, I think it's Rollins. She bumps into a male friend on the street in LA, and he takes her back to his apartment where she kills him. Her feeding is interrupted by the by the man's female roommate, who also winds up a victim of the vampire. Carl's first stop is with the sheriff of a small town where a man is found dead in his car. The sheriff is cooperative until Carl points out that the man's car had the windows taped up with black paper on the inside. When he makes an educated guess that the body had 2 puncture wounds on the throat, the sheriff abruptly dismisses him. Due to his obligation to follow up on the transcendental meditation story, Carl goes to the home of the renowned guru who he has been sent to interview, only to find out that the man has moved out. Instead, Carl finds a real estate agent named Faye showing the house to a potential buyer. At first, Faye mistakes Carl for the exterminator, then thinks that he's a potential buyer, then thinks that he's a tax collector when he identifies himself as being with the INS. Finally, she understands that he is a reporter. And when she reveals that she knows a lot about transcendental meditation, as well as the famous guru, Carl drafts her into ghostwriting his article so that he can chase after the vampire story. Whisking Faye to his hotel room, he leaves her there to write and rushes off to a press conference about the double homicide. Carl immediately irritates the police, because that's what he does.
Yeah.
In charge of the case, Lieutenant Mateo, played by William Daniels. And he discovers that, of course, no aspect of the supernatural is being considered in pursuit of the case. The fact that the police have taken into custody 2 members of a devil cult doesn't help matters, since they think that they have identified the culprits. Meanwhile, Catherine Rollins sets up Ichabod Grace, a pimp who runs a high-class prostitution service under the guise of a catering business. Grace begins sending her on calls, not realizing Catherine's true intentions. Kolchak visits the apartment crime scene and finds Mateo there, pondering the dead woman's closet, which is mysteriously empty. He angrily rebuffs Kolchak, but admits that there is something unsettling about the case. Kolchak brings up the fact that he believes the murders are the work of a vampire, and Mateo immediately dismisses the idea as fantasy and chases Carl out of the apartment. In the hallway, Carl finds the building manager and craftily gets information out of him. It turns out that the dead woman was the sister of Catherine Rollins, who seems to have killed her and made off with most of her wardrobe. The building manager also mentions Grace's catering, linking Carl to Catherine's whereabouts. Carl calls Grace and tries to make a date with Catherine, telling Grace to send her over to his hotel room that night. He draws a cross on the door using poor face borrowed lipstick, and plans on either keeping Catherine at bay until dawn or staking her. However, Grace sends another girl instead of Catherine, thwarting Carl's plan. Carl goes to confront Grace and demands to know Catherine's whereabouts, and Grace admits he sent her on a call to an apartment of a renowned football player. Carl arrives at the scene to find another attack in progress. Catherine is feeding on the football player when several of his teammates make a surprise visit, planning on catching him in the act. What they find is Catherine at work, and she lashes out at them, hurling them around the apartment. Carl arrives in the middle of it, and before Catherine can kill him too, he forms a makeshift cross and fends her off. When the police arrive, she is gone from the room. The cops admit they chased her for blocks, but will only admit that they saw a figure with long hair, not that it was a woman. Since the coven members all have long hair, Mateo thinks that the murders are the work of a cult. Finding Carl at the murder scene puts him in a position of being able to pursue him as a suspect, but Mateo would rather Carl immediately return to Chicago. Vincenzo talks to Carl and berates him for abandoning the guru story and chasing after the murders. After strict orders to leave town, Carl only has 24 hours to find Catherine and stop her. With Faye's help, he goes through all of the recent rental properties until he finds Catherine's lair, a decaying mansion in an isolated location. Forced to confront her in the dark of night, Carl goes out to her house and pokes around, trying to find a way inside, until she finally appears. Snarling at him, Carl fends her off and runs, Catherine right behind him the whole way, leading her into a trap. Carl runs into a location that has already been prepared, a huge crucifix that he sets ablaze, trapping Catherine in a ring of fire. Forced to stay in the shadow of the cross, Catherine dies, or is possibly just rendered unconscious, and Carl stakes her. On the plane ride home, Carl narrates into his tape recorder that Mateo wanted to charge him with murder, but released him after reading the coroner's report, which stated that Catherine's tissue structure revealed that she had been dead for 3 years. Dun dun dun. So what do we think of this episode, Dave?
Definitely good with this particular one, though I find that it's only the 1 or 2 little bits that are interesting with that. First of all, the fact that he just played his boss for getting that particular story, that
Yes.
with how much that they typically argue and whatnot, you figured that he would be on the Kolchak's tricks, but whether or not it was because of either distraction or for keeping things within the plot, it was mildly hilarious and a little questionable for what they did with it, but it was still a highlight of the episode.
Yes, I do love their relationship between Vincenzo and Carl is always a lot of fun.
Mhm. And I think another interesting thing, especially, there's always a particular scene of the police kind of giving their through line of a murder scene and whatnot, and Kolchak being there and giving a lot of questions. But especially with this episode, lots more of the reporters are vocal about particular questions that are going on. And I found that a bit more interesting and more to the actual situation than it has in previous episodes or even in the movies.
Yeah, I think it kind of highlights that like they're kind of taking cues from Carl because like Carl is a good reporter. Like at the end of the day, like he does do stupid shit, but he is still a good reporter, and people like realize that.
Hmm.
Yeah, no, I quite enjoy this episode. It's a fun little sequel to the original movie.
Hmm. I think the only one particular thing, and it might just be on my vampire lore and whatnot, I wasn't exactly too certain on the particular method he went with burning the crucifix and trapping her in a ring of fire. It's like, is that a thing typically, or was that just kind of more of an old-fashioned sort of thing that's kind of been left in the dust?
I mean, fire is normally something you could kill a vampire with, and they recoil from a crucifix. So, I mean, it makes sense.
Hmm. But again, I think just with the whole case that it seemed to go to a paralyzed sort of states sort of thing there was a little bit of question of, is that really the case with the vampire? Or would it just kind of be different in that sort of case? It's like, 70s, most likely working with what they had in the story resolution and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I get your point. It is a lot different than the kind of like vampire lore that we've been watching a lot of because we did both Buffy and Angel, and those have very kind of they have a very different form of vampire lore.
Well, that and the multitude of other vampire things that have come, gone, and taken up the public space of what a vampire is kind of immune or capable of doing, because sometimes it can really fly
Oh yeah,
off into the methods of absurdity.
yeah. No, it really depends on the mythology you're following. Yeah, for sure.
Mm. Mm.
So, did you have anything else about this episode, Dave?
I think the only other thing aside from that was a bit of the lighting work and whatnot they did with the Kolchak going to the vampire's place and the whole chase sequence.
Mm-hmm.
There were a couple particular points and scenes that were definitely fairly good, especially with him shining the light on the vampire with the reveal, the chase through, trying to cover things through there, and especially with the fire and whatnot from there. Hopefully, nothing kind of bad happened with things on set with trying to get that scene going.
Yeah, doing any of that kind of stuff in the '70s, I would have been like, no, you
Yeah,
are
like
not going
have
to
the
do that.
entire fire crew and whatnot kind of prepared to be like, okay, we're doing the scene.
Like, I wouldn't want to do fire stuff now, and I would like in the '70s, like that's like 50 years ago at this point. Like, no, you are not lighting me on fire.
Hmm.
Alrighty, so if there's nothing else, next week we'll be discussing a little episode called The Werewolf.
Getting into that territory.
So, brief synopsis of what we will be going into. In snowy Chicago, the INS crew hold a send off for Tony Vincenzo, who is going to be going out on a singles cruise. However, though, he finds out that he's being audited and can't make the trip.
Ooh.
Carl wheels his way into taking his place, but ends up having to battle a werewolf who is on a killing spree on the ship.
Well, I suppose they had to do some of those particular sort of things at some point. The first thing that popped into my mind is like, well, they had snakes on a plane, so why not wear it all up on a ship?
If I remember correctly, this is the episode where I'm pretty sure it is. Watch one of the stunts that happens in this episode. The minute I saw it, my back immediately was like, ooh. Somebody takes a nasty bump in this.
Even more so than one of the stunts that happened in one of the Alien episodes a week or so back, because I remember a couple of those were like, oh my god.
Yeah, no, if I remember correctly, somebody lands real crooked on like a thing of pallets.
Ooh.
If memory serves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so keep your eye out for that. That'll be fun. So until next time, I'm Paul.
And I'm Dave.